the environment that I was used to, or how theoretically I learned what, as a filmmaker, my goal is, versus when you practically throw it in, and that too in the Indian film industry. It's very different. You're up against so many people and so many ethnicities the minute you exit India. So how do you make your voice stand out? Stories are everywhere. They're in anyone's home. They're in any at any dinner that you go to with friends and family, at funerals, at birthdays, at births, everywhere, right? There are stories everywhere. Never have the same teams. Exact same teams. Always bring in new people.
Why?
Perspective. Every time you will have a different perspective. My set is a never fully Indian set unless it's being shot in India. Our generation, what I feel, is doing a lot of unlearning of how things should be.
Who is Aastha? Hi Aastha.
Hi.
We are in Mumbai.
We are.
Thank you for coming to Mumbai.
Finally.
Finally. The year is 2024. Can I request you to close your eyes for me? Tell us about the first story you ever wanted to tell.
It's a tough one. I have to really think about it. Actually, I told the story. I've already told the story.
Which was it?
It was called The Unsung Feather. And it was about a girl trying to find her identity in a racially different setting as a Black woman. And it was based on an African-American ballerina. So thankfully for me, the stories that I've been wanting to tell I've been able to tell them. So
How
far.
fulfilling is that?
Very. I feel it has so much. I don't think you realize it at that very moment that it's very fulfilling. You realize it much later once the after effects of it start hitting you, whether it's people watching it, people critiquing it, and then you grow as a result, and then you realize, okay, no, this is very fulfilling. This helped me somewhere in my journey. So, in that effect.
Precisely to do that, to help people find their journey, have the faith and belief that it will pan out, and discover the artist in themselves, is why we created this platform called Voice of Artists. So welcome to Voice of Artists.
Thank you.
How are you
for
feeling?
Having me. Great. Great.
When did you, of course, later realized that you wanted to tell this Unsung Feather story? How did it start? Trace that journey for us.
So it really just started in film school. A lot of people shy away from saying things like that, that, film school is a thing. But started there, started in a screenwriting class where I really questioned a few things, did some research. A lot of the stories I tell are heavy on research. That happened to be one of those. I try to find stories that, have been told or necessarily haven't been told well, and try to bring about pieces of it together. So this started in a screenwriting class, and I researched a bit on how African-American women are not very popular in the ballet scene in the US because of their body types and how they look or the color of the skin, because it's a very heavily Eastern European dance form. So to tell her story and journey through dance for me was very interesting because it's representing one art through another art. So I think I really liked that aspect of it. And then, it was a quick assignment, so to say. But the film itself was about 15 minutes long. It was short, very precise, dealt with a lot of, I guess, externalizing the internal in me at that point as an artist when I was learning, growing. The question of identity came in. The question of how would I stand out came in a crowd. And I think that's kind of what I channelized into the film,
An Indian who grew up in Dubai, who lived in LA, made her first film about African American women's
Yeah.
problems.
Yeah.
What is India to you?
Chaos. Good chaos, but chaos.
How does that change the way you look at India from a writer's perspective, having grown outside?
I think when we grow outside, there's a heavy Western influence. What India and Indian stories did was that every nook and corner you look at, it's a different culture altogether. And no other country, at least whatever in my experience and whatever I've traveled and explored, um, can give you that. And I think that's why the stories are everywhere. They're in anyone's home. They're in any at any dinner that you go to with friends and family, at funerals, at birthdays, at births, everywhere. Right? There are stories everywhere, and there's so much culture in this country. Everyone has something to say, and the fact that they're able to say it, you don't get that privilege outside at all. So the chaos is good chaos because all your senses are alive and you really feel alive, which
It's so beautiful what you said, because chaos usually has a negative connotation and people might get overwhelmed by it. But like you said, I think what I'm hearing from you is, if you detach yourself from the present and the chaos, you start appreciating it more, and you start seeing how deep and enriching it can be. Which brings me to the next thing that I wanted to ask you. As a writer, because you write about experiences or characters which you might not be able to relate with directly or even indirectly. How does that happen? How does the writer in you nurture that aspect?
Um, imaginations. I think you imagine, like I said earlier, for me, it's more about research, right? What's an interesting story, or what's a story that I can give my voice to? What's that one thing that really stands out to me? How can I add value to telling the story? So for me, it just boils down to um imagining the stories and then finding interesting characters that work with those stories or in a scenario. So it's a pretty straightforward process, and there's no right or wrong. You can start with a very interesting character and build a story around. But because of me always trying to be surrounded by stories, I've been able to put in interesting characters in scenarios and situations.
Give us an
So
example which comes to your mind.
Unsung Feather, or even The Last Rites, all of them. These were more story-driven films versus character-driven films. Character was secondary in a lot of the process from the writing point of view. But the minute I'm directing something, then obviously that switches. Then you're making it character forward right off the bat. Yeah.
So how do you balance your writer, director, producer hat?
It's very tricky, but I think if you know producing, if you can do that well, the other two kind of happen. And this is coming from a little bit of experience, but also seeing my peers and mentors and how they kind of have how producing has really helped them. There are pros and cons to knowing producing while you're a director and writer,
Because the creative process might get blocked.
you'll always start rationalizing. Who wants to rationalize? You don't want to rationalize when you're emotionally enjoying a process or creatively enjoying a process. But I try not to mix the two. So I have to be very diligent of how much time each part of that process is being put in, especially because we're making independent films. It's really hard to say this is how much time I'm, going to spare for something, because producing is a hat you'll always need to have on. You can never take that off. So that is a challenge. And but I feel like if you know what kind of story you want to tell, it knowing producing helps also knowing budgets. You can think of a Star Wars size film, but will you be realistically with the funds that you have, or with the resources, or time that you have, will you actually be able to do it? So you ask the harder questions, upfront versus I've put in all my money and now I don't know what to do and I can't finish my film.
In fact, it's an interesting perspective because what you're saying is if you keep the producing hat on while you're writing, it will not really block your creative process. It will make you more creative to find solutions in the practicalities.
Exactly. Yeah.
Uh, what would you say to those who find the reality of their lives becoming a constraint in their writing process?
Every story has a home. When you find that home, when you're able to park it, it can happen in 3 months' time. It can take up to 3 years. It can take up to 30 years for a lot of people. How persistent you are to tell that story really defines that this is how much time I'm willing to put into this. Because there are so many stories, there's thousands and billions of stories that are already out there. But all of those stories have necessarily not been able to find home. So, what are you doing as an individual to push those stories forward? So, all in all, to say that it's just a matter of imagine and you can do it. It just ties down to that much.
What about the fear of imagination, fear of going into unknown as a creative?
I think that's what keeps us going, right? If you are so confident that you can do it, then everybody can do what they want to do. The fear keeps you questioning yourself. It, I think, paves more paths than you think it does, and you find, like you said earlier, gives you find solutions. You start finding exactly how to get there. You learn from your failures. You learn from your successes. Just the learning should never stop. That's the only thing.
I liked what you said about your creative process having research as one of the most important aspects of it. Tell us, how do you balance the analytical mindset that you need for research and then balance it with the emotional value or the collective emotional value that you want to bring out through your stories?
Any subject matter that we are trying to show in a film, most of them, unless they're a 100 crore rupee film, which is highly commercial and it's fun and games, even there, actually, you will always find emotions are driving the stories. We have to put that in the forefront. What researching does is give us enough real life examples to take away from. For example, if you have to research on how, say, a sport is played, football is played, and you have to make a show around that, you're going to learn all the nuances. You're going to learn the step-by-step process of how to bring up a team together. What are the rules? For the coaches, it will be different. For your players, it will be different. And then how you're able to bring it together. Bringing it together, your emotion is always, let's win. We need to win. We need to make our team win, right? But what's guiding those is the interesting people that are the players and the interesting coach who's going to give some of their values to the ultimate goal. So, and that goal is highly, very much driven by emotion. That's the simplest way to put it.
You made it sound so simple, but it's actually such a complex process where you're saying you are using both your left and right brain together in the perfect balance. I wish this is something which people can find how to nurture in themselves. What would you say to the audience? I mean, how to nurture this balance of left and right brain?
Deadlines. Put yourself on a certain timeline you want to follow. It really helps being very strict with yourself that this is what I want to be able to do, and how I will do it is up to me through whatever actions A, B, C I need to be taking. And it's much easier said than done to be able to follow timelines, to be able to keep yourself at it, to not give up on a story. And research comes, a lot of people don't need research. A lot of people can just out of their imagination write, which is great, which I'm very envious of. I personally can't. But there are so many people who just can go ahead and do it. And kudos to them, because their imagination is really far-fetched. And I think this is particularly the case with someone who started off as a creative. But people who have maybe not started off as a creative, as I didn't. I was very heavy on research in my undergrad and did something completely different in life back then. That's when you start trying to see how two different processes can be merged into one to be able to simplify it for you. So it's a very personal thing. You cannot say that every person will research. Some people might, some people may not, depending on what their process ends up being. Yeah.
Any name comes to your mind of those you mentioned who can very naturally just imagine?
I think like a Tarantino can do it. I think that guy doesn't need to research anything. He can just go out there, tell a movie, because he loves movies so much. He loves making them, and you can see it in every damn scene you watch. So I think that is a drive I'm envious of, just to be able to imagine and put it on screen.
What do you think makes Tarantino?
Besides his weird fetishes, his passion for movies. He just loves cinema. He absolutely loves cinema. You can see it. He'll reference some movie of his in another film. This very driven, purpose-driven filmmaker, in the sense that I want to make a very good film. I can make you hate or love a character who is in realistically may or may not be as lovable, right?
Yeah.
How can you do that? So I think that's only possible if you really truly love something so much, and I think that's Tarantino for you.
Can passion be cultivated?
In some cases, yeah, I think so. You can. It comes from a very personal drive, I feel, and you cultivate it. Not outside person can't come and do it for you. It comes from within. I don't think that's the part passion plays, at least in cinema.
The way we would sum up what we discussed in the past couple of minutes is basically you're telling people, don't make excuses, be clear of what you want to do, and it's the self-discipline and commitment which will make you go forward. There is no two ways about it.
There's no two ways about it. You're accountable for yourself. Bottom line is that. And it's very normal to slack. And it's okay to be forgiving to yourself as well. There are days where you can't, and you just can't. And it's okay.
Right.
To be able to forgive yourself was also another task altogether. Besides, hold yourself accountable to a point where you can step away from it and come back to it. Have that flexibility, that elasticity, as you say. Yeah.
I'm loving how you're making such complex behavioral dynamics sound so simple. But it's so important because you said self-love, discipline, commitment, at the same time forgiving and being flexible. Is there and yes, I know it'll be different for different people, but is there a broad do's and don'ts as a creative person?
No, I don't think so. Creativity itself needs to be felt within. Like, you need to feel it for it to be able to come out on any medium of your art or any storytelling medium. So I don't think so. I don't think there's any do's or don'ts. I would say it's about being sure of what you want to do, and if it doesn't go through, then it's okay. It's fine, because there are going to be other opportunities. There's a reason for anything not working out. Maybe something big is going to work out. Who knows?
We are going into philosophical zone, but I'm loving it because that it's okay is so difficult to arrive at. And especially we are in Bombay right now, and Bombay is this hub of overflowing seemingly creative energy. And I'm saying seemingly consciously because, a lot of people may want to become an artist in whatever choice of art form.
Yeah.
But either there are distractions or there are overwhelming number of energy around them.
Yeah.
How to reach that it's okay stage and how to find your own path when there is so much of activity and opportunity or the lack of around you? I mean, how do you navigate this?
So how I see it as a goal you have for yourself, then I see how you channel that goal into actualization, and then you see how that actualization, whether it turns into something or not. That all these steps have something to do with control, knowing how much control you have over things, which I learned very late, and I'm still trying to reach that point where I can say, okay, I don't have control over something past a point. I'm going to try hard, but if I don't, I'll have to step away.
How did you learn that?
Experiences, like really hard hitting experiences, being thrown into environments I have not been used to, dealing with people and dealing with so many egos at one point of time. It's a process. You cannot jump from point A to point B. For the longest time, I did think that, but then when you're thrown in a place like you said, Bombay, where everyone's trying to get to somewhere. It can really easily take you away from where your goal is. So easily. I feel like the environment that I was used to, or how theoretically I learned what, as a filmmaker, my goal is, versus when you practically throw it in, and that too in the Indian film industry. It's very different. And different stages of production have different kind of challenges, and some are very practical challenges, which is day to day, which something you can, a mistake happened and you can move past it, and you move on. But there are repercussions to it that you start personally feeling, and that's where it becomes a big challenge for you to be able to keep your sanity, but also be, show up the next day. So to sum it up, I think it's just knowing how much control you have over things. And if you don't have it, it's okay. You just have to keep going, because you can withdraw yourself from a situation at point A. 3 years down the line, you're going to be put into the same situation, and the starting point would be where you left it at. Because that cycle needs to end. So you either go through it or it'll come back later. That's
You have to deal with it.
Yeah. You have to deal with it at any given point. So just deal with it and get over with it, and then move on.
Oh God, you are so beautifully summarizing the doing and the being part of it, like accepting what it is, and how Krishna says, "Karmanyavadika raste mahafalishu kadachan." You have to do what you are supposed to do.
It. Yeah.
There is no shortcut. Yeah. There is no finding a way. There is no putting somebody else responsible.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the challenges are different in production and in sets. I want to just segue from there to asking you about the difference that you see in the sets here in India and in LA or wherever other places in the world that you have experienced. What are the good things which different parts of the world can take from the way they do production?
Yeah, I feel the processes are different. The core is very simple, very similar. They're aligned, but the processes are different. The experience, and this is only speaking off of my experience. You can be on a set in Hollywood or any international production. Every set is different as it is, but the one common theme there is that it's driven by creativity. It's driven from a creative outlook or a creative lens. Story forward, film forward, ideas to get it made and get it made well. So everybody, regardless of what department you're in, you're chasing that. You're making sure all your paperwork is in place. You're making sure everything is aligned, making sure everyone's getting paid in time, paid well enough, fed well, all of that. But the one thing that they don't have is Jugaad. And then when you come to India, everyone is running on Jugaad. Some way or the other, how can we make it work? And sadly or coincidentally, Jugaad and production ends up plugging in perfectly with one another. And inherently, productions here become very producer forward versus creative forward or story forward. May not be the case in every scenario, but on a holistic level, that's what it is. People here want to make sure everything happens in a budget, and that pressure entirely falls onto the creatives to make sure, and that pressure exists through the line. It's not here or there. Just the way it's tackled and approached is very different. So I think the US could use some of Jugaad, and India could use some of the precision and the way of how things are done. Once that comes up, then nothing like it. That's what we.
That's an ideal world, right?
That's an ideal world, but we don't live in one, so we just have to deal with it.
The vision of Voice of Artist when we started out, we imagined a world where art is above chart, which means to say that you do art for the sake of it. But yes, if you top charts in the process, we will celebrate it. But the reason for art should not be the charts.
Yeah.
But you're a perfect example of someone who has conquered both art and the charts. Your short films have gone to Oscar qualifying film festivals. At the same time, you have produced Diljit Dosanjh's music album. How do you manage art and chart parallelly?
See, the processes for them are very different, but the core job is the same. With a more commercial project is where you're inclining towards on-screen perfection in terms of every process that you do. Whereas in independent projects, you're letting emotions drive those stories. And with those emotions and with the, I guess, the process that you've been gifted in that journey, you then start seeing things for it. And as filmmakers, someone who's doing indie projects, you have a sense of what is going to do well and what isn't once you've made it. Not to be overconfident, but just to know enough, self-awareness, how well it will do. So we never really chase that this needs to be the next big thing. It happens. It's a part of the process. And even if it doesn't, we have another try, right? In terms of your commercial projects, the chase of success is bigger. You want to make sure it's seen. You want to make sure people like it. So I feel like the indie work or the projects that are done with a far more smaller, tight-knit team are the underdogs. And those are important to ground you, to tell you where you really started from and how do you bring that resilience into your more commercially viable or commercially seen projects.
Can you take us through your experience of how it was to produce Diljit's album G.O.A.T versus Last Rites? Because in Last Rites, you shot it in Banaras,
Yeah.
but you got a team from LA also to work there. So help us understand how these two were different and what was similar.
The teams were, funnily enough, quite alike. They were actually from the same cohort, just big group of friends there as well as in Banaras as well as for G.O.A.T. I think when we were doing the last rides, it was a couple of years before G.O.A.T came out, the album, the videos. What the last rides ended up doing was building that camaraderie and a trust with your team. To be able to then relate to in a more commercially viable project, there's already a sense of comfort that you have with the team that they'll bring it to vision. How they were different, and this is something as a producer I try to do quite often, is never have the same teams. Exact same teams. Always bring in new people.
Why?
Perspective. Every time you will have a different perspective. So the teams work on rotations. And this is something which vastly differs when you're doing more commercial projects. And when I mean different, I mean different ethnicities even. So it's never, my set is a never fully Indian set unless it's being shot in India. And the reason for that is you're accountable for one another. There's this Indian competitiveness that comes in us that no, we are better, right? And if that is the case, then you put yourself out there as well. Not saying that you take away from any talent that's here, because I feel like if producers from here with the right motives and the right mindsets were to be sent to a Hollywood production, Jugaad is their biggest weapon.
And strength.
And strength. So it is, there's this endless possibilities, and that's the good stuff. But circling back to commercial and independent projects, I think projects are made with no benchmark that it has to end up somewhere. The best case scenario is you will hope that it's being seen by as many people as possible, especially for short films. For features as well, some films take the route of, okay, we need to get distribution upfront, we want to make sure it's seen, whereas some are more independent projects which eventually find home after the festivals runs or after that. In terms of commercial projects, you're already with a goal. You already know what number you want to reach. So how you reach that number is back engineering from there. Yeah.
You said you like to keep your set different. You are saying different. I would say inclusive. So yes, you are not deprioritizing
No.
any group, but you are actually making it inclusive, and you're talking about diversity here, which is brilliant, because that should be the base, the foundation.
Absolutely. Whether it's from a gender perspective or from an ethnic perspective or backgrounds, experiences, it's really good to shake it up. I feel once you do that, it's really helps. Everyone's point of view becomes interesting. That, you know what? The most interesting part is people say you're making films and stories and concepts are your biggest seller. I feel it's the people. Because you can have a great story, but if the behind the scenes is not taken care of and the right people aren't employed for a particular job, you're never going to be able to make a great story come to life. Because the vibe that goes into making a project is really what makes it. As
Tell us more
opposed
about
to
that.
So if you're making something with a lot of positivity and joy and seeking fulfillment, creative fulfillment at the end, you will know that that project will take really good shape. And I think that's what happened. So even though Diljit's album was very commercially high up there, the intent and the emotion behind it was such a tight core team that, you know, really enjoyed the process. And I think when you enjoy the process is when the art really comes forward. So and that's the kind of balance I try to bring in whenever I'm doing either, regardless. I don't think the level of a project should define how much of yourself you're putting into it. I think A to Z, it should be the same. So that's just what kind of drives me into doing.
It's uncanny what you're saying, because we imagine us to be a rebel collective who wants to unlock the artistic energy in the world, to create this global movement called Art Above Chart, which builds a positive tomorrow.
Yeah.
Having said that, it's uncanny because what you said is something similar to what Tushar also said, and interestingly, you both know each other. You both are New York Film Academy graduates. I had the same astonished emotion, what I had then, what I have right now, listening to you saying you can actually quantify the effect of having a positive mindset on sets.
Yeah.
And you've seen that, you've experienced that.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So anything in the world, where not even just set, let's forget filmmaking for a second. Anything you put out good intent to, you see that it somewhere transpires. Good intent with action transpires into the result that you, or close result that you wished for. Same thing goes on our sets. You have to set a mood. You have to have the laughter. You need to have difficult conversations, but you also need to let go of whatever qualms you have with one person or the other. Letting go becomes really hard even in those scenarios. When you start getting personal or when you start getting iffy about certain things, then it becomes, then you don't know what the result will be, because you've set out to do your job, but you chose not to do your job to your 100% because of something that happened 12 hours back, right? So every day you show up, you have to hit the reset button holistically from within yourself, as well as for the sake of yourself, as well for the sake of the project, which is a very nuanced task to do. It's very difficult to do because we're in the business of emotions. Everyone is out there telling stories everyone's trying to get themselves out there emotionally. Um, so it's a very difficult thing to do, but it's a very necessary thing to do. Because the minute you hold on to a grudge from yesterday to the next day, that means 10 other days go in a very similar direction. Um, and then when the end result comes, the anger or the angst in you from that one day ends up showing on screen because you have not been able to get a great sequence as you imagined it, or you were not able to think right, or you were not able to move past from that scenario. The other thing ends up being working as a team, because that's not my job is very easy to say, and it's very important to set boundaries. Don't get me wrong. Very,
Sure.
very important to set that past this is not my job. But if you feel you are in a position where everything you do is going to impact the project in the long run, you have to put yourself out there even more. That's what personally works for me. I don't stop at 100. Then I have to go past it. Otherwise, there's no point to myself. It's also self-validation, right? Why are you doing it? You're doing something because you're doing it for yourself, which is at the end of it a project that you're doing for yourself. You're to make every project as your own with right boundaries. I think that's the way to navigate.
To make everything your own. So
Yeah.
it's this ultimate sense of accountability and involvement.
Yeah.
And belonging is the word I think would suit here. Any broad do's and don'ts which you keep in your mind for your sets, or what would you tell to the beginners or even maybe experienced people? Because a set is a very high energy, high movement, hyper place.
Hyper place.
You seem to be so quiet and calm and composed. How do you do that?
It's person to person. I don't think you can pinpoint one particular do or don't. But like I mentioned, like having to let go of what happened yesterday and not let it reflect the next day, or go with a level-headed, mindset to be able to not uh, be very reactive, because you are going through something internally, but there are at least 120 people around you at any given point of time, either in the pre-production space or the post-production space that you're dealing with. So kindness becomes very important. And that's something I keep reminding myself that, regardless of whatever it is, you taking out your anger on a spot dada or at your art assistant or anybody will not help as an HOD. You have to make sure you're humanizing and equalizing everyone when you're, or even if you have, overstepped, you have responded to something in an unkind manner, the importance of an apology is far larger in that space. I think people will um, truly remember you for that. They will not remember you for your reaction after that one point. You've not undone anything that you've done, but you have taken ownership. You've acknowledged it, and that is important in life in general, but even more on set, because everyone has their set of struggles. Everyone's dealing with some stress of their job. Like no job on set is easy, not one. Everyone is working very, very hard, and that's the first step is to acknowledge that, and then is to be um, kind enough. And even if you have gone unhinged into some spaces or in certain conversations, it's important to acknowledge it and then get over it also, not hold on to it.
I want to go inside your brain. How do you get over it? Like, I'm sure you must have faced situations, and you can quote an example if you want. Any situation on your set as a producer where you have to find a solution, nothing is working out. How do you switch? Like, and this is so important because right now what you're talking about is not just the functional skills you need to be a producer or anybody in the production or in the filmmaking business, but at the same time, more if not more equally important to functional skills is the self-awareness or the behavioral part of it.
Uh, Everyone has their days and everyone has different days. So even not speaking for myself, even for my peers, what I've seen is everyone's going, like I said, everyone's going through different things at any given point. You're on set, fine. You're doing a job, great. You cannot you may not be 100% that day. I think that's where the team really comes in, because then your assistants, your associates, or your seniors or your HODs really become that place for you, or should become that space for you, where you can go to them and talk to them and say, hey, I'm not in the right. And you will notice most people would, most heads at least will say, "Don't worry, I got you. I got your back." And that itself has a lot of meaning. So to be that person for people on set, for me, that becomes very important. That regardless of who you are on a team, to be able to treat them with equal respect, equal time, equal attention that they may need, or even just generally, I think checking in with them if they're doing okay, because a lot of it, it's like you mentioned, it's very high functioning to be on any set. It becomes very, even a small shoot, like even our shoot right now, there's so many little details that go right. 10x, 20x, 50x the amount of people, it just becomes almost unmanageable. So to trust your team to do what they're signing up to do, but also give them enough freedom to do what they have to contribute. Everyone's on set for a reason. Nobody on a team is there for just nothing.
Yeah.
So this is something that I usually talk to on my pre-production meetings with my teams as well, that it's a little bit more than just you today. It's about everyone else, and accounting for everyone.
From individual to collective mindset.
Yes. Yeah.
Beautiful. From this, I want to segue into the output that comes out of being in a set. Your production is done, your post is done, and then it is out. Would you say that cinema has a responsibility towards individuals or society, or what is the purpose of cinema for you?
As filmmakers, we have a responsibility. We have a pretty big responsibility as filmmakers to give back, to put out the right and the wrong in correct proportions out to the world, but to do it in the right manner, everything in limits, everything to a point it doesn't harm the greater society, because you are using a medium to tell a story to people who are so obsessed with cinema, or even if they're not, and if maybe say in 6 months period one individual is watching this one movie, what are they taking away from it? What if they are in a mindset which is not the very best for them? What do they go outside and put back into the society once they've seen something? So when we were talking earlier about research, a lot of that process goes there as well. Because for you to be able to think that this one particular story is great, it's about this dawn in wherever in the world, and this city, and he has an empire of his own. It's a plot for so many shows, but why do you relate and empathize with that character is important. That's the emotion you're bringing in. So to be able to send the audience away with something that they really can wake up the next day feeling good about themselves, or they've learned something which really which was a stigma in their mind before. Cinema knows no boundaries, right? Everyone has a story they want to tell, and you can be sitting here in Mumbai watching a film made by a Japanese filmmaker somewhere in Colorado.
Right.
You can do that. That is happening. What is that one person taking away what is that one person trying to communicate to you as a viewer, and what as an audience you're taking away from it? And that's where the boundaries start clearing up. The geographical boundaries start clearing up. And that's where you have to be even more careful how you're representing a certain story or a character or a country or an individual's journey. And while cinema knows no boundaries, while storytelling knows no boundaries, similarly, emotions also know no boundaries a lot of times. So we have to be very careful with the kind of content we put out there. To for people, for younger people to also watch, and we are in a country with the largest youngest population in the world. We're an ever growing state, and the cinema, is it matching up to that? Are we making movies like that? Are we going to address things that we have not been addressing? These are the questions we need to be asking ourselves as filmmakers.
This is so important what you just said, because with the responsibility that filmmakers have, you're also specifically talking about the responsibility a writer or a director or a combination would have to tell stories which are good as well as bad, but with the right balance. I want to ask you, what would you say to those writers and directors who are working on something which may be showing the dark realities of the society? How to find a balance in that?
We were talking about cinema knowing no bounds. Same way imagination knows no bounds. I'm not saying PG content is the only way to tell stories. Is uh, Fiction and entertainment plays a big part. But you just have to be a little mindful of who your target audience is. Psychology is important. Understanding human psychology becomes very important. You're creating characters, but you are a very nice person who is in a corporate job, is running a podcast, and is a beautiful woman, right? And now suddenly, you are writing a character which is to do with somebody getting killed. Who would have thought?
Yeah.
Right? But the way you will approach it will be very different from, say, somebody who's purely into fiction writing. Somebody who can, like we mentioned earlier, can think from their imagination. Don't
Yeah.
need research to do that. So the way you would see it would be from very realistic real life incidents.
Yeah.
What they would do is extremities.
Yeah.
And neither of them are wrong or neither of them are bad. It's just, as a personal opinion, it's something which I do is make sure that I'm mindful of how that character journey is portrayed. Yeah.
No, bang on, because I was writing this character, this woman who kind of fit my personal and professional profile. But in her situation, something extreme happened in her life, which I could have never imagined.
Yeah.
Which made me realize the importance as a writer to, yes, empathize with your character, but at the same time detach yourself, because our realities cannot become a constraint in the way we see our characters. And I had to then ask questions. अच्छा इसके बाप को wheelchair में डाल दें क्या type of things, because in real life you would never say that. But what is this zone? What does a writer go through to not let their niceness or their reality become a constraint in their creative process?
So when I was writing The Last Rites, a similar thing happened. I have never been on a Samshan Ghat. I had never seen a body burn. I had never been into Banaras. I had never related to ever flying down to someone's funeral because kisi ki antim ichha thi, right? I had never even thought about the fact that women aren't allowed to do it.
Yeah.
All of this had to do with research. All of it had to do with imagination, and it also had to do with human psychology. It had to deal with, we had to deal with how emotionally we're able to tell the story, because the character as a hero, like a hero character's journey, is so important that we want to see them win. How would you empathize with a character from Tarantino's film? Why would you empathize with a Nazi? You'll empathize with them because they're a human. There's an emotion that he's trying to bring out of it. So that is the key for me, in my opinion, that really helps ties stories together. It's psychology, it's emotions, it's research, it's practicality, and personal experiences, and then structure to a particular screenplay or a story. Everything's there for a reason. Why good stories make good stories and good films are made with great stories and concepts is not one thing. It's your team, it's your the people behind it, the thought behind it, your personal drive to make it happen. and how important that character is to you.
What's a good story?
That can make you feel something. That can make you feel. For me, that's a personal.
And then you feel that while making it, and then that translates outside of the camera.
For sure.
I'm going to now switch our topic of discussion because this is important for the audience to understand how you have cracked the festival circuit. Because while you have done commercially successful projects, you have so many in your kitty, which you have either written, directed, or produced under the banner of Saadhvish, which have gone to Oscar qualifying film festivals and multiple film festivals, right? How have you cracked the film festival circuit?
There is no set formula to crack a festival circuit. That is the biggest takeaway. Because everyone will come with saying कि हमको कान film festival में अपना shot भेजना है, or we want to get an Oscar out of this one, or we want that. Then I just go back to asking these filmmakers that what makes your film so special for it to reach there.
Right.
Because personally, I haven't been able to make it. If you believe that that's something you can do, I'm not even discouraging you from doing it. Let's do it.
Sure.
Why not? Who knows, right? But the misconception and the purpose of making the film then becomes we want to send it to Cannes, or we want it to be premiered at Venice or Tribeca or all these big names. Everyone has a different requirement. Every festival runs differently. And you're up against so many people and so many ethnicities the minute you exit India. So how do you make your voice stand out? So from a production value standpoint, from a budget standpoint, most importantly, the story. So if your story is bang on and it's not executed well, it's a no-go, right? If you have everything in place and say your edit didn't line up your vision, it's a no-go. So you're up against a lot of odds. And so there is no right formula how to make it to festivals. But yes, it's also important for you. So the reason short films or like feature films go to festivals is as an independent filmmaker, you want to be able to show to the world that this is what I'm capable of. Tarantino has been a theme of our chat. So he had a film, I think, in Cannes, if I'm not wrong. He's a Cannes director. The fact that he was able to then get so much interest around it, to be able to then have that confidence to be able to make more films. So the festival circuit, all it should be doing for you is to A, give you a name, to give you a presence, B, use it for networking because it's great. You'll meet some of the best people you're going to be working with in the future in those festival circuits. And go there with a goal that this is what I want to be eventually be able to do. Because you're going to be seeing so many films that are completely unlike yours. You'll see maybe a winning film that is not yours. What made you stand apart from it? So it's important it's a very trial and error space. It's nothing where there's a short success to it. There's a lot of business side of things that go in the back to acknowledge it as well, that it's not that my film is bad. It's not that my film is not at par. But there are better films out there, and eventually they are running a business. So there's a lot of other aspects to it which come into place. So once you acknowledge that, then you are not as emotionally disrupted when an outcome doesn't come in your favor through a festival.
Thank you for giving this reality check, because you're not discouraging the new or young filmmakers.
Not, yeah.
But at the same time, you're giving a reality check. You need to know why you want to tell the story, what is your goal, and if it ends up, sure, good job.
Yeah.
What would you say to these new filmmakers, young or old, who have a lot of stories in their minds? Most of them, they start with short films and then go to feature films. Maybe some find the funding and get it shot. But then what?
There's no point if a film is made and it's lying in a hard drive. You need to get it out there. So don't be discouraged if your film is not going to be on a PVR or an AMC. You, at the end of the day, have found an audience to it through the festivals. You will eventually try to get some streaming out of it. I see short films as an investment. It comes from a lot of personal experience of making some of our own, but you see them as an investment because you have something to show that's your own. No matter how many commercially viable projects you do, you will never be able to call that entirely your own project. This is, everyone is going to be seeing you basis of that one film, that this is entirely you. So, well, no pressure, but but this is it is what it is. Um, some people can get the entire funding, but the project doesn't sell because practicality, right? There's no known artist, the story isn't great, or whatever the reason may be for any distributor seeing it. um, you have to keep coming back to yourself and saying that, hey, okay, if it didn't happen, the next one. Because the fact that you've been able to do one means you can do more. So you have to keep yourself in check there.
You mentioned about the funding part. I want to just ask you a little deeper, want to go a little deeper into that. Is there any way to navigate this lack of resources or finding supporters? Because uh, given that this industry is so disorganized, where you might have somebody interested in, getting someone else's vision forward, but this person who has this nice story and everything ready, but does not know how to find that ecosystem. How do you navigate that?
I'm still trying to crack it. I'm still, because I'm also working on a few projects of mine. I'm still trying to figure out. But what I've realized is there's been places and people who have asked us or been like, here you go, take the money, but we don't necessarily align with the person's value that we're dealing with. Giving money away is okay. This is an X amount of return we're going to get in the back. But what if I don't have a vibe with you as a person? We're in the business of emotions, right? We need to be acknowledging that attitude that comes with it. There's a lot of camaraderie that is necessary, especially when someone's investing in money. There's a relationship that you have to build with people. So it's completely up to your skill how you're able to do it. And I'm still trying to crack it. I haven't been able to entirely. So there's also a lot of trust that goes in, right? There's fear. What if I make something and it's not, you're answerable to someone who's put in finances and resources, which were very key to bring your vision in. So it would be very wrong to say that, this person's giving me money, but I don't care because I have my vision. I need to tell you. No, you have to respect that fact as well, that there is somebody who trusts you, and use that as a drive to be able to tell your story even better. So it's just the way you approach things really makes a difference.
Without knowing the finite answer of when, how,
Yeah.
but you can at least make a predictable path.
Yeah. And experiences, and go out there. Don't be afraid. I've come across a few people who are, and know them very closely as well, who are introverts, who find it very difficult to go out there and have a conversation with people. And that's okay, but you have to find a path how to break away from that and use your personality as a positive for yourself to make it work. Because maybe as an extroverted, an ex person who's putting in the money or is a financer will not get you. But from a more introverted perspective and giving them facts or finding the right comparables and trying to figure what makes it click, because it's a 1 in 1,000 chance that you will be able to raise for something by yourself with somebody you absolutely love. So it's a gamble.
What is the non-negotiable thing according to you?
Kindness.
Kindness.
Yeah.
This is, I will not say surprising, but it is so important. Above functional skills, above technical skills, above behavioral skills, you're putting kindness as a filmmaker.
Yeah.
Tell us why.
Like I said earlier, it's intention. What you're making something with what's the intention behind it becomes so critical to your ideas. And kindness to every aspect of filmmaking, not just to a second person, but kindness to your story, to yourself, to the people who are helping bring the vision to life. Um, Also to the fact that you don't know the destiny of it. And kindness comes in a lot of correlation with good ethics, making that a forefront of everything. Um, while this sounds all rainbows and roses, and it's very easy to say, it's very difficult to do.
Yeah.
And I wish that hopefully soon we're able to be in a place as an industry, as filmmakers, where we can start using that as a very key tool and factor of making a film, which is hardly to be seen, unfortunately. Yeah.
Knowing all this, what is the answer that you have for yourself? Why do you make films? And by you, I mean you as an individual and you as somebody who runs Saadhvish, the company.
We make films because we have something to say. And everybody is going to have a different answer to this. And this is a very personal thing to me, that for me, I make films is because I have something to say, whether it's whatever medium, whether it's fiction, non-fiction. And we as a collective. So even as characters, as individuals, as a team, everybody has something to say. That's why everyone's a part of it, right? So that's important to me, at least. Yeah.
You have something to say.
Yeah.
So, what is your voice of artist?
My voice of artist is um, to be able to represent a lot of underrepresented folks. I feel there is so much of a gap between commercial cinema and stories that are so important to be told. I always go back to the example of a film like Badhayo. They broke stigmas, and how. A very home cooked story, very Dilli ka ghar, and something's happening in their family, and suddenly your mom's pregnant when you're 20 something. What? And I think that's the right kind of example to give, that you have something to say, you have seen something in your surroundings, you know this is a stigma, but how do you tie it all with humor, with emotions, with the conflict, with drama, with everything, and make it a very entertaining piece. So sure, we have to tell stories and we have to portray characters. It's very important to be able to remember the end goal is entertainment. You
Right.
have to be able to tell a very entertaining story. That's something I personally struggle with every single day when we're developing whatever we're developing in-house. So we keep going back to that it has to be entertaining, it has to be have all the emotions. Remind me what that term is called, the rasas. Navras. Navras. So life
Shringar
is
ras, hasya ras.
yeah. So this all these kind of flavors and experiences that make you as an individual, and then telling those stories from your perspective.
Which is where what you earlier said, having a diverse set of team helps, because entertainment for you will be very different from someone else's definition of entertainment.
Yeah.
Who is Aastha?
A dreamer and a doer.
Everything in your life is balanced, right? I mean, logical balanced with creative, analytical balanced with free flowing.
Yeah, but the balance can be, on some days it can be a 10 and a 90 ratio, it can be 50-50 ratio, it can be 40-50 ratio. So every day is different.
Aastha is also kind to herself.
I'm trying to be very kind to myself. I try.
What makes Aastha Aastha?
Aastha. I'm kidding. What makes me me? I think experiences. My parents make me who I am, because Without them, it was their idea. Like, why don't you try a shot at filmmaking? When I did one 9 to 5, and no disrespect to anyone who does that, I kudos to you, because I could never. And they said, okay, why don't you try filmmaking if you really want to get into the arts? So I'd never use that as a. I never take it for granted, because a lot of parents don't do that.
Yeah.
To let their older child go out there and do what they have to do, or a woman go do what they have to do. So I really hold them to a very high regard. I hold my sibling to a very high regard. He has been the backbone, and also my partner in crime, in making movies. So we're we're hoping to be the next Russo brothers.
Yay. Yay to that.
Yeah. So yeah, it's keeping a very knowing what your core is, going back to reality and grounding yourself. I think that's very important to me and makes me who I am. Yeah.
And it connects so beautifully with what we started with. You saying, being a part of Indian diaspora, you've grown all over the world, but you have that root in you.
Yeah.
So how do you see that root? Like, what is being rooted mean to you? I'm sure it will be different from what it means to me.
Yeah. Why don't you go first? What does it mean to you?
Being rooted, and funnily enough, even though only in India, but I have grown in multiple states in India because my dad was in a transferable job. So while my mother tongue is Odia, my native state is Chhattisgarh. But if somebody asks me, for me, being Indian is who I am, and I'm not from this place or that place. It's very difficult for me to say, "Hamare yahan vaisa hota hai," because there is not one "hamare yahan." Being rooted to me is knowing where I have come from, and the values or the beliefs that I have inherited, and then what my ecosystem and environment has shaped, still makes me who I am as an individual, while having a core that comes from far off.
Being agnostic of your, I think there's our generation. What I feel is doing a lot of unlearning of how things should be. And that comes from a very broad statement, and I'll leave it at that. But there's a lot of unlearning to do what we've been taught to do. The root for me personally comes from a place of, I grew up in a very nuclear, tight-knit family. It was just the four of us. So it's about going back to that root, going back to my school friends, going back to my friends from undergrad and my previous masters, acknowledging that that's my root. So what grounds me is very important, and I think being Indian grounds me. You can travel the world and you can feel you belong nowhere, right? But the minute you come here, you know this is home. Even though for the longest time I couldn't call India home, and a lot of people know that, they've heard me cry and whine about how I don't get India. I still have those days, but somehow not getting it, somehow the chaos makes it what it is. So regardless of, I guess, my travels and all of that, home is first within, then your immediate surroundings, then the bigger social circle you build. And I think once you're able to find that, or you're working towards finding that, you figure out eventually.
Yeah, and so beautifully you put it. The definition of being rooted also can be different for different people. Like for me, it is finding my identity and knowing what makes me me.
Yeah.
And for you, it is going back to how it all started. It is so beautiful. The crux of our conversation is coming out to be diversity of perspectives, having an open mind, having that lens of empathy towards yourself, towards others, and just being out there while knowing who you are within.
And all of this to say that it's a journey, and I don't think I've even reached, say, 5 or 6% of where I would ideally like to be. But I think there's a start, and I think acknowledging that start is important. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Aastha. Is there any last thoughts that come to your mind?
No, thank you for having me. I think what you guys are doing is very necessary, because there's a big gap from the mainstream and the indie. And I think what you guys are trying to do is really pull that together. So I really appreciate anyone like that, because that's exactly what we are trying to do through our stories and perspectives we're trying to bring on screen, to bridge those gaps, to bridge those boundaries that still somewhat exist, without really taking away the core boundaries, but still being able to, pull the threads together. So thank you so much for having me. This
It's
has
a
been
pleasure.
great.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Astha.
Thank you.